Hello and welcome back. Today's video is featuring the Boss Mega Distortion MD-2. It's another one of these old pedals. I'm just kind of revisiting it to see if it's still applicable in today's day and age, which is 2025. I'm going to be using a PRS SE Custom 24. Two humbuckers. Various switching, but I'll basically be switching it between front and bridge pickup. Usually with the volume and tone on 10, but I may switch. So we're using a Megami cable going into the Boss Distortion, another Megami patch cable going into a Walrus Audio ACS1. When it's on green, that's Marshall. When it's on blue, it's Vox AC30. When it's on red, it's a Fender Deluxe Reverb. The Mega Distortion 9-volt power supply, pin negative. It's got a power draw of 20 milliamps, so very small. And the interesting design, level, tone has got like a kind of top control, regular tone, but I've got a bottom control, in other words the bass. So you can dial in more bass or tighten it up by taking some bass out. Got the distortion setting, and then you've got this other setting which is gain boost, which I presume, I haven't looked at the circuit diagram, but I'm presuming it's some other kind of diodes or some other gain stage on the circuit, presumably to fatten the sound. In fact, let's hear the clean tone. This is Marshall, Vox, Fender. Now I've dialed in a small amount of distortion and pretty much the tone settings are kind of neutral. And try and get some sort of sense of unity. So before I really play anything, it's probably important just to give you the feeling of the controls. I'll start with the distortion. So it's really saturated by the time it gets beyond halfway. You can sort of hear the compression kicking in there. That's for chords, but for single notes. See, that for me, that kind of setting is too... I wouldn't want it to be compressing out like that. I'll switch to the front pickup. Go to Marshall. I'm going to go to the bridge pickup again. Yes, I think that the more that this distortion is up, it's that fizzier type of gain. But this is the one that kind of will tame some of that fizziness. So if you're looking for something that competes with, say, the Boss DS1, the old distortion, and you don't like that fizzy sound, and you dial that sound out by taking the tone down. But on this, you could kind of got a bit more control, so you don't have to necessarily do it with the tone controls. You can do it with the amount of actual natural distortion. Not that I really like that sound. Let's try it with the Vox. So this pedal is really reacting against the amps. The previous video that I did, which was the Donna Morpher distortion, that didn't react quite so dramatically to the different amps. So I would say with this one, I'd be interested to know what amps people are using with this, because you can hear it's a vastly different tone. I mean, I wouldn't really expect anybody to be using a Mega Distortion with an AC30, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to work with that Fender sound, the Marshall sound. You would have thought this would be in Marshall territory, but so far I think it works best with my Fender anyway. If I was going to pair, I dare say I could get the Marshall to dial in. So let's have a look at the tone controls. Maybe we'll take some of this angry sound out. Let's just see what we've got in terms of tone control. I'm going to go back to that Fender sound. So you can see the bottom control. You've got piles, absolute piles of bass end. There's the tone control on minimum, so I'm guessing it's a fairly standard tone control. But if I use it as simply as possible, so in other words, only use the one gain stage, and then treat that tone control like I would on a DS1. with that level of distortion with chords, if you're one of these players that's always at 10, I've just rolled my volume control 10, 9, 8, 7. So I've left it on those settings where it was kind of compressing. So if I was playing a rhythm sound, I would back my volume off so I don't hit so much compression. I'm going to put the volume back up to 10 again. So you can hear it's a bit messy at 10, but at 7, it's not overloaded. But when you go to single notes at 7, we go to 10. So where you think you need to go to 11, basically if you keep your volume at, say, 7, so if you want to have higher distortion settings, then try to only use the amount of that hard clipped sound that you really do need. In this instance, we've got the gain boost as well, so we can add sort of... Again, that's at 7. See, with that gain boost up, it's still too much. Up to 10. 7. 10, 7, so what have we established? It's got more gain than I can see most people ever needing. You can go to really over the top saturation. You've got tons and tons and tons of sustain. You've got a good amount of tone control, and I like that you've got bottom end control whenever you need that little bit extra bass, because a lot of pedals scoot the bass away and you have no choice, but in this instance you can add it back in, and that really is the thing that gives you like a 4x12 type feeling, you know, because that's one thing that 4x12s always stand out, that they've got just this extra bit. So you can, even if you're not using a 4x12 and you're doing what I'm doing, is going through an IR amp, a simulated amp, then you can add that little bit of extra in of the bass using the bottom control, that one, and it just gives you that little bit extra just realism. Okay, let's swap guitars. Les Paul Studio with a pair of humbuckers. Again, mostly at 10. Let's see what happens just on these settings that we've got. This sort of pedal is going to agree with a Les Paul. I don't know, I mean, with Strats and Teles, I'm sure it will work, but most heavy players would probably want to play with humbuckers, I would have thought. Correct me if I'm wrong. Some people do use kind of vintage Strat sounds, but I would have thought the majority, if I'm to generalise, ooh, dangerous thing, I would have thought that it would definitely suit a Les Paul player, or the PRS. Okay, I've taken the tone down to 0. Let's see if we can get that. let's take it away from Angry Teenager to... Okay, so that's the rhythm pickup. Difficult to get that on camera. Okay, so that's rhythm pickup. I'm going to go to treble pickup and do the same. Tone on 0. So it's kind of like you get that cocteau sound. That is a nice sound. It's a bit of a granddad sound, obviously. It's an old sound, but... Actually, I am quite pleasantly surprised at this, how usable it is. I really like the tones on it. I think it's great for lead sounds, and I think it's fine to back off and use it as a kind of rhythm sound. So actually, I am quite surprised. Obviously, I'm not being paid to promote this pedal in any way. I've bought this with my own money. I bought it used. I just wanted to try it out and see what it was like. Actually, a very usable pedal. There's lots of really useful sounds in there, but particularly, as I've said about the bottom control, I think that is its forte really. And I do like the fact that you can dial in the amount of clipping and control that top end, that fizz, that you can control it and then use the gain boost to smooth things out. It's quite a versatile pedal, this, and I like pedals that are like that. They're really useful when you're at a gig and you're not quite happy and maybe you've switched guitar and you're not entirely comfortable. It's really, really useful to have a pedal that you can then tweak that little bit. It creates the difference between not enjoying a gig and enjoying a gig. So all in all, I'm actually quite enthused by that, and I don't suppose it would harm you to try one out. It's a thumbs up from me. So it remains for me to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.